The Angelus is a painting by Jean-Francois Millet that depicts a farmer and his wife praying over a basket of potatoes, presumably while a church bell rings in the background. It's a lovely piece, completed between 1857 and 1859, and besides being a prominent work in the realism movement, it's not particularly interesting on its own, besides its connection to Salvador Dali and his theory. Dali was adamant for years that he felt the couple wasn't just meant to be praying over their harvest, but holding a funeral for their dead baby. Now, that's dark, and was treated as wild speculation, until Dali convinced the Louvre to do an X-ray on the painting, which would reveal some of the many layers of sketches and paint that make up a work like this. One of those early layers revealed a larger, oblong shape at the woman's feet, too big and square to be the outline of the basket in the finished piece. Meaning, Dali may have been right. The initial intent might have been much darker. Now, this is still heavily debated today. The actual X-ray image looks like this, so it's hard to actually glean much. And Millet specialized in paintings of farmers and laborers that look a lot like the Angelus, so something that dark would be more out of place than the final rendition is with the rest of his work. But me personally, I'm somewhat tempted to side with Dali. At least, I don't think his speculation was as crazy as some people treat it. You can say a lot of things about Dali. He was kind of a fascist sympathizer. But it's not arguable that he was a master at painting, and that includes composition. And I think there are aspects of the composition that suggest the dead child theory. The basket of potatoes forms a compositional triangle between both people, implying it might be a point of importance. It's visually darker than many of Millet's pieces, with both figures somewhat obscured from the distant light source shrouding them in shadow. It has less movement than many of Millet's pieces, both elements that make it seem much more somber. And though it's mostly due to the lighting, I think that the hole next to the farmer is much more pronounced than the holes behind him, making it seem less like a field being tilled and more like a grave. Now, there are other explanations for all of these artistic choices, like the religious reverence that's seen throughout the piece. But if Dali's theory had come to fruition, and the painting took its final form as a work about losing a child, almost everything about it could stay the same, and it would still be a remarkably coherent work, which in itself is strange and kind of impressive. This video isn't about the Angelus, but it's the best example I could think of to illustrate a point I'm going to be talking about a lot. Even when looking at a piece of work that changed during development, or pieces that were never fully realized at all, there are ways to discern what the intent might have been. It's almost never conclusive, but if you're right, you're a genius, and if you're wrong, you look absolutely insane. And I'll let you decide which of those I am, because I have become obsessed with The Tragedy of Ethan Winters, an art book that compiles tons of concept and development art from Resident Evil 7 and 8. I'll leave the PDF in the description. I found it while digging around for art for my last video, and it is gorgeous. There's so many pieces and styles mixed in. There's storyboards, environmental designs, some of the most horrific shit I've ever seen. There are some scenes that were clearly put together as concept from like different stock images, and it looks so much like a hidden object game. I really like how this looks for some reason. There's also comments from the art director. In Resident Evil 7, we utilized a photo scanning technique for our character designs, but in Village, we decided to be more creative and tried character designs that didn't look like regular humans. I noticed, but these comments, unfortunately, don't give us much context that can't be gleaned from just looking at the pieces themselves, and I really wish they were more extensive, but there are a few pieces in here that have really captured my attention. It's the set that the one Duke image is from. They're done in the same style and presumably by the same artist, but I don't know who. I'll just go through them all really quick. The first is of Lady Dimitrescu, presumably with her castle in the background. Her weapon is described in the notes as garden trimmers, and it all reminds me so much of Clock Tower. Scissor Man, more like Scissor Woman, am I right? She looks very much like how her daughters ended up, and I'm sure that's what they recycled for the inspiration.
And it's me, hello, Cassandra.
The second is of Donna's early concept, not as one woman, but as a family of skeletal ghosts, with a faceless mother and father and children with masks over their mouths. There's also a photograph in the middle of the mother throwing herself off a waterfall, quote, due to a tragic incident from the past. I will give this art director $100,000 that I don't have to give us any more elaboration on what that means. And the masks, what are the masks for? They look metal to me, kind of like that saw trap. And why doesn't the baby have one? The baby's kind of cute, to be honest.
This is torture.
And again, the house is in the background. This one looks remarkably similar to the final game, considering how different the characters are. The third is Moreau, who is pretty similar, but with fishing shrapnel coming out of his back, as well as the head of a woman he loved. Again, they don't elaborate on how she got there or why, but god, it is horrible. Most interesting to me is the house, which seems to be fully submerged underwater with a bunch more trash like that on his back. The note says it's a flooded village setting, so maybe the village itself was going to flood, not just Moreau's area. I don't know. There's also multiple creatures stalking around. The fourth piece is of a crying child seemingly becoming a lichen. The art director's note says there was going to be a scene where the young men of the village drank from a chalice and turn. Curiously, the child seems to have a tail which matches the monster. This is also definitely not what I'd call a young man personally. This kid looks like 12, which does make it darker. What is the background setting too? It looks like a temple or a gladiator arena. The fifth is Heisenberg's family. These are the Heisenberg twins. This is their mother, strung up by her limbs with an exposed brain. And who are they? We don't get any clarification on who these guys are. What the fuck? They're just there. The sixth piece is of Heisenberg's father, the original leader of the village, and his creature transformation that was eventually given to Carl. His Bane mask is also not explained. I assume it's related to the masks that some of the other characters have, but I don't really know. And I don't know why some characters have them and not others. The sixth piece is of a preacher character that didn't make it into the final game in any form, but his fleshy dragon transformation was incorporated into Lady Dimitrescu later on. I think it's really interesting that he's here, but I don't have a lot to say about him. And the last is the Duke piece. Yippee! Besides being kind of derivative of other fat, greedy bastard tropes, we already talked about that, I actually really like this piece, mostly because it's the only one that looks like a full composition. The others were just characters, sometimes overlaid on a disconnected backdrop, but this one is a scene. I love the spotlight-esque lighting, this sort of halo of dead things. The blanket blends into the carpet, making it kind of look weird and amorphous. The hooks seem like they might be actively lowering things down to him, and along with the light in the ceiling, it makes me think that this room is underground with a hole in the ceiling. It's very evocative. Is that a pumpkin over there? I just really like whoever this artist is. The style reminds me a lot of Mike Mignola. I'm pretty sure there are some RE7 pieces included that they also did, but unfortunately, I can't be sure. I don't know if the physical art book included credits for each piece, but the PDF doesn't. So if anyone knows, comment and I'll pin it. I would love to know who made these. But what does any of this have to do with the fucking Angelus or themes that are scrapped but still visible? Well, a few things. I don't think I'm the only one who feels Village is kind of random. Like, it technically does follow on from the plot of Biohazard, but the setting and tone and even lore are so incredibly different, it feels like a huge jump. Resident Evil 7 is one of the most gritty, disgusting, viscerally unsettling horror games I have ever seen, in a good way. It plays on how people try to maintain a sense of normalcy in the most unlivable conditions imaginable, and that really gets to me for some reason. It's so, like I said, visceral. It feels real in a way that I think only it and PT have ever really captured. Village is a gothic fantasy horror set in Romania, and oftentimes feels more like a dark comedy or a strange sitcom than straight horror. These pieces of concept art specifically feels a lot closer to the gritty tone of Resident Evil 7, especially the Heisenbergs and the Ghost family. They both feel like they're pulling from scrapped ideas that we see in the RE7 concept art, which leads me to what is my overarching claim. I think there was a time in development where Resident Evil Village was set in the American South, and continued on with the themes and setting put forth in the 7th game, but pushed it into that more surreal angle that we see in the 8th. The Preacher is the one that really gets me. It feels like such an American trope to me. It's not one that I feel really translates into the Romanian Gothic horror setting, at least not in the form we see in the concept art. Heisenberg's entire character, both in concept and in the final game, feels so Rust Belt to me. From the clothes he wears to the worn down steampunk surroundings, it all feels so reminiscent of other dark southern art like the Backwater Gospel or anything by Poor Man's Poison. The entire visual style of this starving family that looks like something out of the Great Depression, contrasted with the Duke's obscene abundance, the broken down cars and telephone poles, the religious overtones. It's so coherent, more coherent than the final game is to itself. Except for these two, Moreau and Lady D. How would they fit into this theory? Well, they really don't. You know what there's not a lot of in Rust Belt backwoods villages? Water and Castles. Yeah, I really don't know where to put these or how to incorporate them into my theory, but it's also only 2 out of 7. I don't feel like they're enough to throw out my theory entirely. And I can't describe why, it just feels so right to me. That's why I said this theory was based on nothing but vibes. It's really just the vibe I get from these pieces. And to be fair, I have asked around my friend group to see if it's a fair impression, and they all do agree that the archetypes that these seem to be representing fit better in Biohazard than in Village. So, yeah guys, my friends agree with me. What do you have to say to that? But I almost feel like my thesis isn't just that there was a point in development where Resident Evil 8 was set in the American South. More than that, it's a question. Because even if I'm wrong, even if my theory was never even considered, I think it's my brain's way of trying to rationalize this central question. Why does Resident Evil Village feel so far removed from the game it's a sequel to? And why does it feel so disconnected within itself? I actually think the overall art direction is incredibly impressive for how it blends all of these clashing aesthetics together, but even still, they do clash. Pretty much every Lord's area feels like a totally different game, and the pacing feels similarly jarring. And I guess my best answer to that is that there might have been other story directions that got enveloped into this final product, but never quite fully meshed. It's similar to how I feel about Duke's development. In my last video, I talked in passing about how weird it is to take a character designed for a very specific purpose and just put him somewhere else, and also how rare it is for a character to remain this unchanged from their concept art to final design. There are so many little details about this game that make me think the production was weird. Bad? Good? I have no idea, but weird. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm as crazy as Salvador Dali. Okay, so after I put up this poll and people voted for me to make this video before my next one, I think I made it seem like this would be a theory about the lore of Resident Evil 8 and not the production, so I hope that wasn't too disappointing, and just in case it was, here's some lore theories on Duke. I think he's the most interesting character in Resident Evil 8, and a lot of people liked when I mentioned him last video, so let's speculate for a minute. We get no answers regarding what his deal is, and it's looking less and less likely that we ever will, to be honest. So what do the fans think? One quote-unquote theory I still really like is that he is the merchant from Resident Evil 4 after he made tons of money off of Leon, which obviously isn't serious, but it's funny enough to mention. Another slightly more serious theory is that he's just a manifestation of Mother Miranda, since we know that she is a shapeshifter who does lead Ethan to some kind of answers in some instances, specifically as the Hag, but it doesn't seem like this is probably the case because the Duke seems to be actively working against Miranda for whatever reason, and in the DLC she mentions that she met the Duke one time and that was likely the extent of their interaction. So they're probably not the same person. I've seen a couple assertions that he's more mystical than the creatures we usually see in Resident Evil, indicative of something deeper and more long-standing than the modern science fiction we usually see. More along the lines of mystical creatures that operate on slightly different physical rules and tend to have unknowable morals, something like Celtic Fae or Islamic Jinn. It's definitely fun, but I don't know how well it fits with the rest of the series. Somewhat similar, I've heard theories about the Duke being somewhat aware that he's a game mechanic to varying degrees. His implied deeper understanding of the universe and lack of understanding about himself not being about the village or the mold, but about how there's something deeper at play beyond the veil and that he has his role to fulfill, potentially every time the game is replayed, over and over again. There's a really good ficlet on Archive of Our Own called The View by Wagon, which vaguely outlines his becoming self-aware and implies that both his size and teleportation were actually the results of him being forcibly sedentary, stuck in the specific places that he's always pre-programmed to be. It's more of a story than a theory, technically, but I do really like it. I had really hoped that there would be more lore exploration for the Duke on AO3, but no. It's just Carl and Ethan fucking mostly. There's someone specifically who has a theory that Duke isn't a post-human infected by the Megamycete, but a vessel that it created by and for itself to explore the world, learn about humans, and try their pleasures. And I like that one a lot. It explains so much of his uncanny look and behavior, as well as his attitude, and there's really not anything to contradict it, and I really like it. And honestly, I am still pretty partial to the Fifth Lord theory too. It's not really practically possible. Basically every point people bring up as evidence has a contradiction against it, but I just really like it thematically. It would give him a motivation for helping Ethan if he was a defector who wanted some kind of revenge or closure. As cliche as this sounds for a fan theory, with 5 lords, it would make a very clear 5 stages of grief about their shared circumstance. We don't have a character who actually enjoys their infection, understandably, but the Duke already has a very positive outlook on his strange, unfitting position in the world. Giving him an arc about losing humanity and coming to appreciate his new powers and limitations would complement the traits he already has. It would also make the DLC more interesting to me if Miranda and the Duke had a history and some kind of animosity towards each other. If she knew that he helped Ethan save Rose, it would make sense for her to resurrect him to get her back. It would be so petty and vindictive, it fits her character really well. So no, I don't think it's true really, but I still kind of want to believe it, just based on vibes. Oh hey, we came full circle! And that's all I've got for you this time, guys. It was a little weird, a little scattered towards the end, but I hope you enjoyed it. I really like this game, and I like being able to talk about it. Next time we're going to be talking about bad movies. Oh boy.